What's up, rookie camp losers? This week I'm here to discuss some of the things we learned this past weekend. We learned that the number one team in the league always loses, as the Pimp Dogs found out for the second time. We learned that so far this season, the Pimp Dogs could very well be the biggest hit-or-miss team in the league, after scoring just 46 points. For those of you who struggle with math, that is 110 points less than they scored last week. To put this into perspective for you, Jason, Tony, Van, Kerry, and Scott have all failed to even score 110 points in a single game this season. We learned that Fitzgerald is nowhere near the top 10 in wide receivers, and if Chris Johnson sucks, somehow the whole team sucks. For me, this has to be the most disappointing team so far at 2-2. Last week's number 2 team, the Shuffle, were projected for 132 points, to which Jason felt the need to question and some smack talk on his matchup. Well, he was right about one thing. The Shuffle did not score 132 points, instead posting their second week over 140. All that despite losing Vic early in the game. Arian Foster had his second game over 30, despite Dan's feelings that, and I quote, he will never do that good again, referring to his 48-point outbursts in week 1. Well, I guess not 14 points shy. Oh well, I guess we can count him as a bust. This team has been putting up big numbers, taking over the dreaded number 1 ranking, and will attempt to win this week without a defense, and with a quarterback picked up off waivers. The Shuffle could have played both Scott and Dan at the same time, and still won by enough to hand out a trophy for largest margin of defeat. At number 3, Casey just missed scoring over 100 for the 4th straight week, scoring just 99 points. With Donald Driver stealing the show as Green Bay's number 1 receiver and Dustin Keller getting more looks than any Jets receiver, this team has been very consistent. Cedric Benson has only scored in double figures once this season, yet Casey stays very high on him. Too bad for Casey that he fell to the Rich trade curse and has an injury-prone Marino on the bench, still hurt and still out. So far, this has been the most positively consistent team in the league. Looks like spending a month's salary on fantasy magazines before the draft helps out after all. Rich had fallen to 4th place in the rankings after losing for the second time last week, but rebounded beautifully over an opponent who scored just 44 points. While Rich fell into 2nd place in overall scoring, he still remains a good distance ahead of the number 3 Pimp Dogs. His team is solid in most areas, but he is certainly hoping that some waiver moves will pay off. There's nothing much to criticize when a team averages 110 points per game. This team has since moved up to become the second-ranked team in the league. In his 2 losses, Rich has given up 242 points. Jason has only given up 252 points on the whole season. Well, despite being 5-0, Jason gets no love in our rankings, sitting at 5th. Maybe because he is in a tight race for 5th place in scoring and has given up nearly 80 points less than anyone else. That being said, his pickup of LT has proven to be well worth the risk. He has gone from backup on the Jets and Elway rosters to start for both. He had a great game this past weekend, scoring 31 points. Phillip Rivers has been consistent as well, scoring 17. By the way, I need to thank you for the advice to drop the Steelers' defense to pick one up this week. That would have been a brilliant long-term move. In case you didn't know, they have scored 60 points this season. You only have 2 players who have scored over 60. Scott fell to 6th last week and continued to slide down to number 8 this week. What do you expect when you score 44 points? Every player scored 7 or less, with the exception of Peyton Manning, who had more than half of the team's points, scoring 23. If it wasn't for the fact that the money you donated to the league this year wasn't taking away from my nephews, I would be thrilled that your team is so bad. Now my nephews get one less present, one less meal because of your complete inability to do 2 things at once. You are failing miserably. I'm embarrassed to have my name on your team. I sure hope you are having fun at summer camp while the rest of us are trying to win. Van's team is slowly climbing the ranks, 7th last week and 6th this week despite a 43-point ass beating. Reason being is that Van is making lots of moves each week to improve his team's chances. He is not scoring outrageous numbers by any means, but he is working hard to improve on last year's performance. Hey Tony. Notice how much more motivated Van has been since the league renamed his team? That's you next season. Peyton Hillis has been huge for Van so far, as he scored another 20 points against Cincinnati. Tight end Zach Miller scored 22 to lead the way. Last week's number 8 team is this week's number 7, the Tar Babes, after posting a team-high 101 points, despite poor production from the Eagles receivers. New addition Maurice Jones-Drew scored 27 points, fresh off a trade with Tony. This was by far his best game of the season. Joseph Aday scored 19 and Orton scored 23. The rest of the team was crap. You better hope Colby doesn't suck as bad as he has been, or you will struggle this week against the high-scoring shuffle. I sure am going to enjoy that bottle of wine you will owe me come Sunday night. Thanks in advance. So this week JP should have a grudge on his shoulder. We dogged him about the 49ers, he finally took them out, and they go on to score 16 points to lead the team. The only good thing here is that it would not have mattered, as he would have lost anyways. This team played like garbage. Michael Turner is doing nothing. I kind of wonder if he even has any trade value. You may want to find out, because there are some running backs who are scoring points out there on other teams. In the immortal words of Dave Chappelle, this bores me. Tony, your team is horrible. Maybe you should stop listening to Dan's fantasy advice and start trading for players who are scoring points, despite their name. I told you to take Orton over Brady in the trade for Jones-Drew, but knew you had to have the name. Well, how did that work out for you? Let's look at this to gain some perspective. Had you not traded, you would have won. Had you taken Orton, as suggested, you would have won. As it stands now, you have Brady, the name, who no longer has Randy Moss, while the quarterback you drafted and dropped now has Randy Moss. Rest in peace, my friend. Your season is dead.